The rain had been falling for hours. Daniel's eyes were heavy, his hands stiff around the steering wheel, as his old sedan groaned along the deserted highway. The GPS had been frozen on the same stretch of road for the past 20 minutes. No turns, no exits, no sign of life. His phone had no signal. He told himself it was just the weather messing with the connection. When the glowing sign appeared in the distance, rest stop ahead, it was almost a relief. A place to stretch his legs, maybe grab a coffee, shake off the creeping exhaustion. The building looked decades old, its faded brick facade streaked with moss and rainwater. Above the entrance, a flickering fluorescent sign buzzed in uneven bursts, casting the word "Welcome" in jagged shadows on the wet pavement. The parking lot was empty, but that wasn't unusual for this stretch of road, especially at night. Inside, the air was so still. The faint hum of refrigeration units echoed from somewhere in the back, but there was no cashier, no customers, no sound of movement. The smell was faintly sweet, like overripe fruit, cloying and thick. The shelves were stocked, though most of the items looked outdated. Brands he didn't recognize, packaging styles from another decade. He ran his fingers over a can of cola with a faded label that read "Cola Fresh" in bubbly red font. "Hello?" he called. The word bounced around the room and seemed to come back to him quieter, as if the air had swallowed it whole. He felt the pull of the restroom sign in the corner, a glowing green arrow pointing down the hallway. He hesitated, then walked towards it. The hallway seemed longer than it should have been. The further he went, the more lights above dimmed until only every third light bulb was working. The hum of the refrigeration units was gone now. All he could hear was the soft squeak of his wet shoes on the linoleum floor. When he reached the restroom door, it was ajar. He pushed it open. The room inside was larger than expected, cavernous even. It stretched into darkness, the far walls swallowed in shadow. The tile was wet, though there was no visible leak. A single sink sat beneath a tarnished mirror. In the mirror, his reflection looked off. His face was paler, his eyes sunken, and though he stood still, the reflection's lips twitched into a slow, unnatural smile. Daniel stumbled back, his shoulder hitting the stall door behind him. It creaked open. Inside, there was no toilet, only another hallway, narrow and dimly lit. Something in him screamed to leave, but his legs moved forward anyway, carrying him into the tight corridor. The walls were closer here. The floor sloped downward. The sound of dripping water grew louder, echoing ahead. When he emerged from the corridor, he found himself in another rest stop lobby, nearly identical to the one he'd entered from the parking lot, but wrong in subtle ways. The shelves were in different positions. The welcome sign above the door now read Willomce, spelled Welomce, with the letters uneven. The air was colder. A figure stood at the counter now. Its back was to him, and it was too tall. Its shoulders were unnaturally square, its head tilted at a sharp angle, as if listening to something distant. Slowly it turned, and Daniel realized there was no face at all, only smooth, featureless skin stretching from chin to hairline. It stepped forward. He backed away, searching for the entrance, but the glass door was gone. In its place was another hallway, the same as before, stretching into shadows. The faceless figure moved faster now, its footsteps silent despite its size. Daniel ran, his breath ragged. The floor seemed to stretch endlessly beneath him. The hallway twisted and split, leading to more rest stop lobbies each one stranger than the last. Shelves stocked with rusted tools, walls dripping with a thick, black substance, mirrors reflecting empty rooms when he stood in front of them. The sound of footsteps followed no matter how fast he moved. At last, he found the glass door again. Beyond it was rain and asphalt. He shoved it open and stumbled into the parking lot, gasping, the night air biting his skin. His car was there waiting. He threw himself inside, started the engine, and sped away. The road was empty, the rain eased, the GPS began working again. He didn't look back, but 2 miles later, the glowing sign appeared ahead once more, saying, "Rest stop ahead." The roadside motel was the only building for miles. Its neon sign sputtered against the night sky. Desert Star, vacancy. The paint peeled from its wooden siding, and the desert wind whined through the gaps. Carla hadn't planned on stopping, but the highway had been closed for hours due to a jackknifed truck, and her gas gauge had been flirting with empty. The man at the front desk barely looked at her as he slid a key across the counter. It was an actual metal key, not a card. "Room 6, he said. His voice was flat, tired. "Keep the door locked." The hallway to her room was dimly lit. The carpet was threadbare, smelling faintly of mildew. She found room 6 at the very end, the last door before a wall with a window that looked out into total darkness. The door's paint was chipped, the brass number barely hanging on. Inside the room was fine, just fine, too fine. The bed was perfectly made, the comforter tucked so tight it could have been glued to the mattress. The air was stale, heavy. She unpacked enough to take a quick shower, then sat on the bed scrolling through her phone. That's when she noticed it. The sound. From somewhere above, faint and muffled, came the rhythmic creak of footsteps. But the motel was only one story. She stepped outside into the cool desert air and looked up. Nothing but flat roof and a black, starless sky. When she went back inside, the footsteps had stopped. She convinced herself it was just pipes settling, an old building groaning. At 2:14 a.m., she woke to a knock at her door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Through the peephole, the hallway was empty. She turned the deadbolt and tried to go back to sleep. At 3:07, the knocking returned, this time from inside the room. It came from the wall behind the bed. She pulled the bed away and found nothing but peeling wallpaper. The knocking stopped the second she touched it. Her phone suddenly flickered and died, though she'd left it charging. She decided to leave. As she reached for the door handle, her eyes caught on the dresser mirror, and her stomach twisted. In the reflection, the room was slightly different. The bed was unmade, the wallpaper was rotting off in sheets, and there was someone standing in the corner. A man in a gray suit, head tilted, watching her. She spun around. The corner was empty. When she turned back to the mirror, the man was closer, smiling. Carla grabbed her bag and bolted into the hallway, but no matter how far she ran, every turn led her back to the same door. Room 6. Finally, breathless and shaking, she flung the door open and stepped inside her own room again. But the bed was gone. The lamp was gone. The window was bricked over, and the man in the gray suit stood directly in front of her, blocking the only exit. The last thing she heard before the darkness swallowed her was the sound of a key turning in the lock. The next morning, the front desk clerk slid a key across the counter to another traveler. "Room 6, he said. "Keep the door locked." The mall had been dead for years, but no one had ever gone around to tearing it down. Its parking lot was a cracked ocean of faded paint, weeds growing through fissures like stubborn veins. The signs for once thriving anchor stores were ghostly outlines now, faint silhouettes where letters had been ripped away, leaving behind pale imprints in a sun-faded facade. No one came here anymore, except for vandals and the occasional urban explorer looking to film something spooky for the internet. And yet, tonight, it wasn't empty. Ethan was driving home from work when the storm hit. Heavy sheets of rain, winds that rattled his car doors, lightning that clawed at the horizon. The GPS rerouted him off the main road, pushing him toward an unfamiliar stretch of suburbs before the houses thinned and the road curved toward the skeletal shape of the old shopping mall. He didn't mean to stop, but when he saw the faint flicker of lights inside, actual working lights, not just lightning flashes, curiosity burrowed into him like a worm. That mall hadn't had power in over a decade. The main entrance doors stood propped open, one of them crooked in its frame. A pale, sterile light poured out into the rain, pulling in wet ripples over the tiled floor just inside. Ethan stepped in cautiously. His shoes squeaked in the silence. It didn't smell like mildew and dust the way he'd expected. It smelled clean. Too clean, like an unused hospital corridor. The directory map in the lobby had been wiped down. Its faded "You Are Here" star replaced with a newer sticker, one that gleamed faintly under the flickering fluorescent above. The names of the stores were all wrong. No Sears, no Macy's. Instead, Room 8, Room 12, and Room 17. Each one labeled only as available. The sound hit him then, faint, tinny music drifting from somewhere deep inside. Mall music, the kind of slow, syrupy jazz covers of pop songs that felt designed to melt into the background. Except, it wasn't coming from overhead speakers. It was coming from somewhere ahead. Ethan walked past the first set of storefronts, and his skin prickled. They were open, but their glass wasn't transparent. Instead, opaque white panels blocked the view inside, faint silhouettes moving just beyond them. Ethan could hear voices, calm, measured, murmuring in tones that didn't quite sound like shopping chatter. Something metallic clanged in the distance, followed by the faint drag of something heavy across the tile. Ethan's first instinct was to leave, but the path behind him now didn't look right. He turned. The entrance doors were gone. In their place stretched another hallway lined with more available rooms. The rain was gone. The sound of thunder had vanished. And yet, the lights here buzzed like they had always been on. Ethan tried his phone. No signal. The battery icon flickered unnaturally, jittering between numbers. 80%, 47%, 3%, before freezing entirely. Ethan decided to follow the music, thinking maybe there was still an exit somewhere. The path wound deeper, and the layout of the mall became stranger. Hallways split and rejoined in impossible ways. Storefronts repeated, the same boarded up Room 12 appearing twice and 3 times, each one identical down to a faint scuff mark in the tile. The music grew louder, and then he found it. The food court, or something like it. Tables and chairs were neatly arranged, all facing the same direction, toward a central kiosk. Behind the counter stood a tall figure in a mall uniform. Their head was turned down, unmoving. A plastic name badge on their shirt read simply, "Attendant." The figure's skin was pale and taut, like stretched wax. Their hands rested on the counter, fingers just a little too long, nails perfectly smooth. When they finally looked up, their eyes didn't reflect light. "Welcome back," the attendant said in a voice that had no rise or fall, no warmth, no rhythm, like a pre-recorded announcement. Ethan froze. I think I'm lost," he managed. The attendant's smile never shifted. "You've made it to the center. Few do." Before Ethan could reply, there was movement all around him. From behind the opaque storefronts, figures began to emerge. Dozens of them, all wearing the same outdated mall uniforms, all with waxy, too perfect skin. They walked in perfect silence, forming a loose circle around the food court. "Your room is ready," the attendant said, gesturing toward a hallway Ethan hadn't even noticed before. The entrance was framed by a plastic sign, "Room 47, occupied." "I don't have a room," Ethan said, his voice trembling. The attendant's expression didn't change. "You do now." The crowd parted, creating a path toward the hallway. Something deep inside Ethan screamed at him to run, but when he turned, the way back was gone, replaced by another endless row of white-walled rooms. The music changed. It was no longer jazz. It was something low and droning, a sound like air moving through a massive unseen machine. The crowd began to move toward him, their footsteps perfectly in sync. Ethan backed away, step by step, until he had no choice but to enter the hallway marked Room 47. The air inside was warmer, the light here was dimmer, almost golden, and for a moment, it felt almost safe. Then the door closed behind him. It didn't look like a mall anymore. The space was impossibly vast, a massive chamber lined with endless shelves, each one stacked with objects that looked like belongings. Shoes, wallets, watches, phones, keys. Some were dusty, but most looked brand new. Some still had fresh drops of water on them, as though taken from someone just minutes ago. And then Ethan noticed the other thing. The shelves weren't just holding objects. They were holding people. Figures stood perfectly still between the items, their waxy skin faintly glistening, their eyes fixed forward. They weren't breathing, and they weren't blinking. Somewhere among them, a new empty space waited.